Warning: the following program is a satirical look at Indigenous news, politics, and current events. Bannock and lard is advised.
This is going to be a very, very close finish indeed, I fancy. Richards Ross has got a lot of work to do. McCrory of the United States going well. Protashevsky comes off the bend.
Anin, bonjour, and welcome to the Laughing Drum, my friends. I am your host, Tim Fontaine, and we have got an exciting show ahead. The Red Power panel is here, and they are chomping at the bit, ready to devour this week's news. And you're going to hear from an Indigenous astronaut, John Harrington. But first, let's see what's been happening on the news. We begin in politics, where it was apparently story time. According to a CBC report, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau used a meeting with First Nations chiefs to tell one of Aesop's fables.
Once the north wind and the sun were arguing about who was the stronger.
I shit you not. Trudeau and the chiefs were apparently talking about the raid of a Wet'suwet'en camp when the PM broke into a retelling of Aesop's fable about the sun and the wind. Quote, "It seemed a little out of place," unquote, said one chief, apparently being very polite. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister said the chiefs should feel lucky because it was either that or one little, two little, three little Indians. In Is It Actually Reconciliation news, some First Nation leaders are beginning to question the sincerity or usefulness of land acknowledgements. A land acknowledgement is a statement made that recognizes that you are on a particular nation's territory. And while it is meant to be an act of reconciliation, some are beginning to think the statements are just hollow tokenism. I think this whole situation could be solved if Canada just gave us land back, starting with the Prime Minister's residence, which I could totally move into right now. And according to a Canadian Press article, the feds are divided on whether a proposed Indigenous-themed holiday should be somber or celebratory. That's leading some to suggest just having two Indigenous holidays. But that still leaves the question of what should be observed. We at the Laughing Drum think there can only be two Indigenous holidays: Jesse Jim from the Beachcombers Day and the Feast of Elsie from north of 60. We are going to discuss these topics with my mighty Red Power panel soon, but first we go to interstellar news, where the first Indigenous person in space that we know of made a pit stop in Winnipeg.
When I was 8 years old, I used to sit in a cardboard box and dream I was going to the moon. In the 1960s,
more than 30 years later, John Harrington's dream became a reality. Well, almost. In 2002, Harrington didn't quite make it to the moon, but he arrived at the International Space Station. He's the first Indigenous NASA astronaut to reach space.
I have a chance to go out and share my story with kids that never had a role model in this position. That's not what I set out to do. When I came to NASA and they said, "You're the first Indigenous astronaut," I found I had an opportunity to fulfill a role that I take very seriously.
In total, Harrington spent nearly 14 days in the cold vacuum of space. Then he spent several minutes in the cold vacuum of my presence. Here's how that went down. Mr. Spaceman?
Yes, sir.
Who would win in a fight, you or Commander Chakotay from Star Trek Voyager?
Oh, boy. Well, since I'm real, I probably would. There you go.
If you could go back to space today and bring anybody with you and then leave that person there, who would you bring?
Oh, leave that person. Oh, you don't want to hear the answer to that question.
Did you take any native food with you in space?
Did I take any native food? No, I didn't take any native food other than, well, I took jerky. I took some jerky with me. I took sweet grass and sage. I did, yeah. And all the eagle feathers as well, yeah.
I guess no smudging in space, though.
No smudging in space. You can't start a fire in space. Now, as a matter of fact, it's a good story. I was at the Kennedy Space Center, and a very good friend of mine, Louise Kleba, was an engineer at the Kennedy Space Center. She's a Ojibwe, and so she smudged me before I flew. So we went outside of the crew quarters, and before you fly, it's called primary contact. No one can be around you unless they've had a medical examination. Okay, so, and she worked with engineering, so she could. So she wanted to smudge me, And so she's smudging me. Some guy walks out of a theater and is like, oh, what's that? And starts to walk over, and she goes, stand back. Stand back. Primary contact. And I'm like, thanks, Louise. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful lady, yeah.
One last question. Do you miss floating?
Do I miss floating? I imagine pushing off the floor and hanging out in the corner. It's every kid's dream. Yeah, it was a fabulous time.
I want to give you a gift.
Oh,
it's a
thank you.
can of Laughing Drum canned luncheon meat. Maybe the next time you go to space, you could take that up.
Okay.
It probably lasts about 1,000 years. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for speaking to the Laughing Drum.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
I like to think that was a dream come true for both of us. We have to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to devour the news with the Red Power panel. Don't go away. Did you know we've got a podcast?
Don't lie.
It's true. Yes, now you can listen to the Laughing Drum on your smartphone, tablet, or even your Walkman stereo. Subscribe to the Laughing Drum podcast on iTunes and Google Play right now. All right, welcome back to the Laughing Drum, my beloved, tender Laughing Drumlets. I am your host, Tim Fontaine, and I am excited to be here with you and the Red Power panel. This week, the Red Power panel is educator, comic, and owner of a lying coochie-ching mouth, Alyssa Black Wolf Kixon, comic and licensed mustache owner, Sasha Mark, and making his return to the show, a man who got his name by wrestling a bear into submission with his bare hands, Jerry the Big Bear Baird. Welcome to you all, my friends.
Hello. Hi.
Okay, so you heard in the headlines, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had some First Nations chiefs scratching their headdresses after he told an Aesop's fable about the wind and the sun during a meeting about pipelines. Red Power panel, what's your first reaction to this? Alyssa, let's start with you.
I thought he chose the wrong fable. I think he should have gone with either Pinocchio, because he's a lying sack of, or The Boy Who Cried Wolf, and just have it The Boy Who Cried all the time.
Sasha, over to you.
Pinocchio would have been good too, because he's like really good into like building things that keep extending into like unwanted territory. I think also Pinocchio's a good choice in that too.
Mr. Barrett.
Well, I think that if he's going to be listening in on storytelling, we should talk in language, speak in language, so that he doesn't understand, and then maybe he has to reinterpret what he thinks he's hearing, right? And then it would just be crazy. But I also heard that Donald Trump was watching cartoons and came up with his idea for the wall from Humpty Dumpty. It was Humpty Trumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Trumpty had a great fall, which is going to happen soon anyway.
That is probably true. I believe that. Guys, do you think Trudeau... do you think he's...
I don't think about Trudeau all the time. You seem to be fixated on him.
You think he's genuinely trying to connect with First Nations, or is he being patronizing? Do you think he's actually trying to make some kind of a spiritual connection?
I think he's trying to make, I think his genuineness is about as genuine as our relationship, me and you, Tim.
Well, yeah.
So
I hate you.
Not at all.
He's ignored all my tweets, so I don't think so.
Jerry?
Well, when you're a high-profile, leader of a country, you make promises, right? And he's failed in so many of those promises that. And my poor mother, God rest her soul, she must be rolling in her grave, because she was the biggest Pierre Trudeau fan ever. And we had pictures of Pierre Trudeau in our house when I was growing up. I said, who is this guy? And now, here's the son of Kong doing his thing, and the lies are just as big that he's trying to climb up. And it's just failing. And I look at him, and I think, this just isn't right. You showed potential, you got the votes from the Indigenous people, and now it's just all collapsing around you, and it's his fault.
Yeah.
What the hell, man?
That's what I want to know.
Exactly.
Do you think this is going to hurt him in the poll? Not necessarily this, but everything that you just talked about. When it comes time to election time, do you think First Nations will rethink?
I think that most Canadians, hardworking Canadians, he's lost a lot of their vote. The Indigenous people, I think that he's lost a ton of votes there. So if he gets in, it'll just be by a marginal vote, if he gets in at all. It'll be close, yeah.
All right.
I think he's blown it.
I'm willing to bet money on that.
Really?
$10,000. Wow. Okay, what is this whole thing? You touched on it now, but for your other two, what do you think this says about the relationship between Trudeau and First Nations? Like, how do you think he views that relationship based on just this meeting alone?
The fact that he even brought a fable to.
Well, I don't know. I don't think he brought a book out. Like, I think he told it.
The fact that he like said it with his mouth to actual adults. Like, I'm a mom. I do a lot of ridiculous things to convince my children why my decisions are the best decisions. But again, I'm raising 2 kids. Like, I'm not the prime minister of a country. Like, I still think I come up with better fables than he does.
We're going to get to that in a minute. We're going to get to that. Sasha, what does this say about the relationship?
I feel like, to him, I think that Indigenous people are a chore. They are, you know, like, he has to come up with different ways of, like, how to interact with them in this kind of, like, weird kind of, like, almost, it stems from, like, a weird kind of, like, I think a racist kind of point, you know? He's just really out of touch with Indigenous folks and thinks he knows how to interact with them on the presence of, like, his own ideologies without being in touch with Indigenous people at all. I don't know. That's not funny. That's actually so scary.
I think APTN should develop a show called, like, it's like Undercover Boss, right? But we shave down Justin, or put his hair up in a man bun or whatever, and then we send him off. We send him off into First Nation communities, and he has to live there and see what the grassroots problems are. Nobody knows that it's him, but he goes around and he sees. He'll be dead by the end of the. He won't survive a winter's day. But it would be interesting to see firsthand, you know, a political leader,
like that show First Contact. Except
this would be.
Except he's undercover.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So Trudeau in red face, Donald Rose, president of the and we've got a show.
That's right.
Okay, so I told you we were going to do this. If you could tell a story to Trudeau, a fable, a legend, whatever, what would you tell him? Payback time here.
I think I would tell him the legend of the poo that could talk. And the moral of the story would be that he is the talking poo. That it's you, Trudeau. You're talking pile of.
She didn't actually swear. It's amazing, Sasha.
I think we've all tried to talk to him at all different kinds of levels. So I don't know if stories are the best way to get to him anymore. You know, it's just not working. So my story is no story. Bye bye.
Lovely, Jerry. You're a storyteller.
I think the lessons behind the Wendigo would certainly fit in this particular case. And although the Wendigo is a very serious story and has all kinds of repercussions for people who are greedy and take from the land without giving back. He probably has heard the story many times before, but he hasn't taken it to heart, and I think he could learn from that. Because it's gone too far.
It'd be the Wendigo who cried pipeline.
And on that cheery note, my friends, we've got to take a short break. But when we come back, we're going to have more from the Red Power panel. Don't you dare go away. Don't you dare!
Did you know we got the social medias?
Don't lie.
It's true. Like the Laughing Drum on Facebook and follow us on Twitter right now.
And welcome back to the show, my friends. This is the Laughing Drum, where we don't believe in blood quantum, but if we did, one sip of our blood would render you 300% Indigenous. The Red Power panel is here, and we are moving on to our third and final topic. Okay. Something we've discussed on the show a couple of times, I'm pretty sure, is the idea of Indigenous-themed holidays. Now, according to a CTV News article, the feds are debating what a proposed new Indigenous stat holiday should be, and some are even suggesting 2 holidays. So, what do you think? What are some good Indigenous-themed holidays? Alyssa, let's start with you again.
I got a good one.
All right.
It will be called Reconciliation Day. It'll be like Groundhog Day, except reconciliation comes up, and if it sees its shadow, then it's not happening for another 5 years.
Well, 5 years better than 500 years, I guess.
Yeah.
I thought we already had one. I thought it was Halloween. Have you ever been to a party store? So much Indigenous wear. I always like the scary things. I always liked, scary movies, Halloween, being native in Winnipeg. I always liked all that stuff. So I think Halloween's already there.
Mr. Big Bear Barrett.
Well, I like North of 60, and I like Tom Jackson. So I think we could combine some of the challenges of our people and some of the protests and some of these big political gatherings that we have, and have an Action Tom Jackson Day. And then we all go out on I'm not sure what day it would be, but we would go out and honor Tom, but also look at and talk about some of the issues that are affecting our people.
Have you seen that new movie? This is getting off topic here, but have you seen him in the new movie poster for?
Yes, very, very. And I think Evan Adams is in there.
Is he?
I think.
Yeah.
I think he plays.
Lots of Indigenous people holding guns, which is
hunting season.
I don't know if that's good. Anyways, let's get back to the topic here. Is Indigenous Holiday the right way? If this is the purpose of doing it, is this the right way to educate Canadians about Indigenous peoples? Alyssa?
Yeah, I think so. I think, only if Indigenous people are the only ones to have the holiday. Like everybody else,
has to go to
work. And then we get to spend that day going around telling everybody about what it's like to be Indigenous, and then treat everybody who's working like they are Indigenous. So I get to go into, like Justin Trudeau's house and put a pipeline in the middle of his bedroom, cry at him, and then I'll give him his sacred spirit name or something like that.
Sasha?
I think having at least one safe day out of 365 other days, it's cute. But I also feel like it just doesn't stop there too,
I guess that's the risk, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to you, Jerry, in a second, but is that the risk that making it a day gives people an easy out? They can say, you know what, I thought about Indigenous people that day, and we're good.
Or it gives people that Indigenous people need a holiday. What else do they need? Reconciliation?
They've given enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jerry, what do you think?
Well, of course, when you speak to Indigenous people, every day for us is Indigenous Day. I mean, we can't get away from it. And we're asked about it. We're questioned about our culture. People point at us. They whisper about us when we're standing in line at Walmart. It's there every single day. But down in the States, September 27th is their Native American Day. And only one state offers the day off for all employees, federal employees, and that's Maryland. The rest of the United States kind of acknowledges it, but doesn't really get the day off. And I don't think they give a rat's ass about it. But here in Canada, Aboriginal Indigenous Day, I thought was an awesome idea. And I love a parade. Who doesn't love a parade? Of course, I was at the parade here, and it was coming down one of the streets in Winnipeg, and some woman behind me, she says, "Oh, now what are the Indians protesting?" And I'm like, "Excuse me, can we not have a parade, enjoy ourselves?" So and then the Métis float, it got stuck under the bridge. It was something to see. I mean, this has got to be a sign from something, but there it was, stuck underneath the bridge. So, but I think people appreciate it, but we need to educate the mainstream people more about the issues on Indigenous Day.
But do you think, is there a holiday that's meaningful to you? Is there, we're talking about Indigenous holidays, but is there actually a holiday that's meaningful, that you actually stop and think about what it's there for? Maybe more, I don't know. I don't know if Martin Luther King is a thing, I actually don't know, but I mean, for some people in the States, it's actually a meaningful day, right?
Not really. I know on Veterans Day, on Remembrance Day, I do think about our Indigenous fallen soldiers having had family members who fought in, the Korean War and whatnot.
My wife and I were discussing that, and Aboriginal Veterans Day is the day before
Right.
Remembrance Day, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a difference there too.
Yeah.
That people acknowledge.
Well, and of course they would have to have their own separate day because when they came back to the war, like from the war, they were still treated like it was atrocious, the treatment they got. So that is like the one holiday where I do actually like reflect upon something. Like Christmas doesn't mean anything to me. Sorry. He's such a child. He's all about the Santa Claus.
Okay, we did this on the show before. We're going to do it again. I want you to come up with a holiday. What would be a good? You already did. You can go again if you want. But what would be a good holiday to force Canada to create? Anything. Could be anything.
How about Romeo Saginash Day?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah. Romeo Saginash Day.
And Romeo Saginash Eve as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We just got to tell Trudeau to
Yeah.
There's got to be a good thing to do. I have no clue.
How about Sasha's mustache?
Sasha's mustache. There you go, Jerry.
Well, I like Orange Shirt Day. That's a huge topic out there.
Actually, yeah. I mean, it's not a stat holiday, but it's a day where like kids at my school.
Yeah.
If you want to acknowledge, a residential school and bullying, Orange Shirt Day is a way to do it. I know I wore an orange shirt and put it as my profile picture on Orange Shirt Day, and then people that didn't know about it just thought, you look like a giant, giant peach. You look like a pumpkin. They had no clue what the significance was behind it, and I thought, well, there you go.
Yeah. All right. Okay, guys. So all of this talk, I think the central theme of all of this was reconciliation. I think you'll agree.
Yeah.
So we at the Laughing Drum have created this completely scientific reconcili-ometer, which you can see right there. Now, based on these stories today, where do you think we are on the reconcili-ometer? And this is something we'll revisit as the show goes on.
I mean, for this panel or as a nation?
As a nation, based on the stories.
Well, that guy called you a peach, not an apple. So I think we have some progress. So I think we're doing
I
good.
see the reconcili-ometer is moving.
I don't know. Where's the hellfire on the reconciliation?
I think extreme.
Yeah.
And then, hey, we're all good.
Oh.
Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
Let's make it up.
I still think I'm very high.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean I'm all smoked up on the marijuana. But maybe somewhere between very high and high.
All right. Did you guys agree with that?
It's the potometer.
I'm okay with that.
There you go, Canada. There you have it. Reconciliation is being measured in a completely scientific way, and that's all the time we have for the Laughing Drum.
And we were making so much progress.
Thank you so much to the Red Power panel for coming out tonight, and thank all of you for tuning in. Make sure you come back next week, or Trudeau is going to track you down and hug you until you turn blue and pass out. We'll see you then.